Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for those who have already joined. We are going to start the session in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, we're going to start the session. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. We're going to start in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, the live session will start. Okay, welcome everybody to this live stream of the Experts on Air session. I would like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank. Thank you for your participation in the course. Thank you for your participation in this live expert session. Let me start with some quick facts about the questions this week. 21 questions came in, and we had 248 votes. So that is a great start, I think, of this course. Is Menno Valkenburg. I'm one of the experts in this course. My colleague Jen Thiel is also with us in the background. My background is in project management. I've been in development projects since 2008. I've been working funded projects in the Caribbean region in different countries, in Suriname, Jamaica, Barbados, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago. I've been working with PM4R, Project Management for Results, which is part of this training since 2012. And I've taught a number of training classes over the years. Happy to see you all here and that you participate in this course. We do these sessions with the two of us. So my colleague Gentil, he's actually from Haiti, and he's also in Haiti right now. He is in the background. He is monitoring your live questions. So you have an opportunity already now to put in your live questions in the screen below. Accessed this live stream. So I welcome everybody to put in your live questions there as well. Okay, let me explain a little bit the agenda. This first session, this first week, module of content, which was the project charter. So this week we will deal with one module, the project charter. You have put in your questions. We selected the top 6 questions, which we're going to answer and review in this session. Second part, we have an opportunity to answer your live questions. So if you have some burning questions, if things that we haven't answered or discussed in the, let's say, the prepared and voted questions, then feel free to enter those questions in the live section. We'll pick a number of those as well. This session will run between 30 and 45 minutes. So at the maximum, we will stop in about 40 minutes from now. Okay, with that, let's start with first some course statistics. I think it's always interesting to see what we have. This is actually yesterday's number. We have 9,705 registered participants. We did a quick check this morning, and there's already 100 participants more registered. So it is still possible to register for this course. If you have colleagues or friends or people in your network that would like to join this course, that is still possible. So please feel free to join the course as well. The median learner age is 33 years old. And we have participants from 179 countries. That is really amazing. We have people from all over the world. The top 10, USA, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. We have Brazil, India, Colombia, Mexico, Peru, UK, and also Haiti is in the top 10. So Gentil will be very happy with that. Let's dive into the first question. The first question that received the most votes, from Hussam. It received 62 votes. So thank you very much, Hussam, for putting in that question. And it's actually a couple of questions in one. It has to do with the project charter for IDB financed projects. Some of you who are involved in IDB financed projects. And the question is, what is the involvement or the degree of involvement of the IDB in the production of the charter, the project charter? Moreover, how does the IDB, as one of the major stakeholders, will ensure an ongoing monitoring from the beginning and from the preparation of the project charter to reduce its own risk exposure? This question is, do the IDB have to approve or give its non-objection to the project charter or after giving approval to finance the project? Well, let me start. First of all, the project charter is not necessarily a document that you find as a, let's say, mandatory document as part of the IDB funded programs. Typically, what you have in an IDB funded program is you have a loan proposal document or a loan contract. And I'm sure some of you who've been working with IDB projects are familiar with that document. Basically, that loan document contains on the objectives of the project, the results matrix, the timing, the financial side. It talks about risks. It talks about assumptions, some governance. The way the information in that loan document is the same that you'll find in the project charter, except, and this is, I think, why it's important to have the project charter. The project charter is basically a short some of the key aspects of your project. So the project charter, you don't want to be that a document of 50 pages or 100 pages. You want it to be a short, to-the-point document, maybe 3 pages, 5 pages maximum, that you can basically share with all your stakeholders. Basically an open document, so you can use it as a communication tool as well. I have a supporting slide with this question, and that actually comes out of the PMA Learning Guide. I hope all of you had a chance to look up that learning guide with a lot of useful information, and as we answer some of the questions, we will refer to some diagrams and information in the learning guide. This diagram is on page 14 in the learning guide, and it basically shows where the or how the development project lifecycle flows and where we are focusing on now with this course. So typically in a development project lifecycle, you have programming, identification, and design. And this is sort of the, let's say, the project design, which if I connect that to an IDB perspective, the design will get approved by the board of the IDB, as well as by the country in which the project is being implemented. The implementation starts with the start phase. And that is actually the moment when you would charter. So you would basically take your design documents, your loan proposal documents, put the information in the project charter, and that's where your project gets started. So the question was, how does the IDB ensure monitoring and follow-up? So basically what then happens during implementation is that these projects are required to, first of all, produce every year an updated annual operating plan. And actually that annual operating plan is basically also something that you're going to produce. All the elements are in this course. So over the next couple of weeks, you learn all the elements that go into an annual operating plan. So that's one element, that's one document that the IDB uses. And then the project needs to produce a semi-annual progress report. And they basically need to report back on their results matrix and outcomes. So those are 2 key documents that the IDB then uses to do the monitoring. So in a way, you could say the IDB is not really involved in the project charter. They don't have to give their non-objection or sign-off or approval, but it is a very useful document. And I think, and we'll have some other questions on the project charter, I think it's critical that every project, no matter whether it's IDB funded, no matter how big it is, would benefit from having a to-the-point project charter. And I will come back to that in one of the later questions as well. Okay, let's go to question number 2. Question number 2 came in from Lee, 239. It received 46 votes. So thank you very much for that question. And that came in nicely in as a second most voted question. About the project charter and project control. In our opinion, and based on previous experiences, what is the most effective way that a project manager can take control of a project to ensure it stays within its scope without causing friction within the team? And as a second question, what are some characteristics of a good project manager? Great question, great question. And I'm going to answer that in a couple of ways. First of all, in order for a project manager to keep your project in control, it's very important to be proactive. Project in a proactive way. What does that mean? It means that once you have developed your schedule, you want to update that on a frequent basis. You want to proactively manage your schedule and manage your budget so that you know where you stand with your finances, with your timing, with your activities. We manage your scope. And no matter how small or big scope changes are, you want to document them, you want to get approval on them. One of the elements in the project charter is about change control. So that is a mechanism to keep your scope. You want to proactively communicate. So you want to identify your stakeholders, you want to check their needs, proactively go out to them, communicate proactively with them. So that's one element. Another element, as a project manager, you cannot do this on your own. So also here I have a supporting slide which talks a little bit about the Tuchman model for phases of team development. I'm sure some of you have heard of the stages: forming, storming, norming, performing. Coming out of this model from Bruce Tuchman. It's quite an old model. It's developed in the 70s of the last century, but it is extremely relevant today, because as you have a project team, as you try to keep your project in control, you need to make sure that you develop your team. You want a team that is a high-performing team, that is a successful team. And this diagram shows a little bit you go through as a team, but also what you can do as a project manager to help your team to go through these cycles. This diagram comes out of a book, The 5 Frustrations of Project Managers, and there is a lot of soft skills and people skills that go along with that. So to come back to the second part of this question, what are some characteristics of a good? Well, there are basically 3 areas. First of all, there's technical skills. You will learn a lot of these technical skills in this course. So that's a very good starting point. Second, you need management skills, managerial skills. You need to be proactively managing your team and other people. And then the third element is these soft and people skills. If you look in the PMA guide, the guide with this course, there's also a section on page 25 that basically identifies 4 areas. Project manager, 4 characteristics for a good project manager. One is leadership skills, communication, key, problem solving. So I think that's also a nice summary of good characteristics of a good project manager. And then finally, what is also interesting to know is that the IDB has actually developed a project management leadership course as well, which is sort of a follow-on on the PMA and PM4R course. And that leadership course also deals with a lot of like how to deal with conflicts, negotiation, communication, etc. So there's a lot that goes into becoming a good project. In this way, I gave you some ideas what's involved and what are some of the good characteristics of a good project manager. Okay, let's go to question number 3. Question number 3 came in from G. Taylor. Thank you very much for that question. It received 24. The question is, does the IDB provide a project charter template for project organizers to use? Great question. Templates are absolutely useful. Probably want to have templates. You want to sort of standardize your key documents that you use in your organization, that you use in your projects. There are a lot of templates out there. If you put in Google project charter template, you get a lot of options. But actually, you can stay very close to this course because in the course, on the second slide, I have an example. In the course, we actually use a project charter. So there is an exercise on the project charter in last week's module. And that is a Word document. And the exercise was to further populate this project charter based on the case study. You can actually use this document as your starting point for your project charter in your organization. So feel free to take this. You want to make some changes, maybe put in your own organization logo. Maybe you want to tweak it here and there. But this template basically contains the most important information that you typically need in a project charter. Read the PMA guide on the project charter that also nicely describes the key elements that go into the project charter. So you definitely want to tune and fine-tune the project charter for your project, for your organization. And if you want to agree a standard within your organization, then that is absolutely a good practice to do. Okay, that was question 3. I have question 4 that came in from Mauricio. Question 4 received 11 votes. Mauricio, for putting in your question, and thank you for the people who voted. And let me pause for just a second. For those of you who are on the live session, feel free to put in your live questions in the section where you entered this live stream. I think right now we have received 2 questions in the live section. So Gentil, my colleague from Haiti, is monitoring the live section. So feel free to put in your additional questions. 3 questions. We have 3 more to go out of the prepared questions. And yeah, feel free to put in your additional questions. 4 came in from Mauricio. Thanks again, Mauricio. It's about the project manager, and if the organization in charge to execute a project will appoint the project manager from the organization staff, and the project manager will be involved in the project charter development. Is it a good practice? This is a real nice question. I think, well, there's a couple of things here. One is, I think it's great if you can have a project manager out of your own organization. The project manager, the person from your own organization, knows your organization, knows how the organization works, knows the procedures, knows the culture, knows how things work, how projects work. That is a huge advantage over having somebody coming in from external who maybe doesn't understand the organization. So if you have, as an organization, if you have the possibility to nominate a project manager out of your own organization, that's great. Even if that project manager does not have all maybe the necessary skills for a project manager, implement that with somebody from outside if needed for specific areas where maybe that person is not yet so familiar. So my experience and my preference would always be to have a project manager out of your own organization. I think that will really help the project to become more successful. Question is, when do you assign or nominate the project manager? And is it okay to nominate the project manager help develop the project charter? That is great. In my experience, my perspective, the sooner you can appoint your project manager, the better. You have an idea and you want to turn that into a project, or you have an approved project, or you have a business case or something that you want to go do, and you already know that Mary or John is going to be the project manager for that, then the project manager at that moment help develop the project charter. Just to put it from another perspective, what you see a lot is that projects are designed and developed by a group of people. Implementation is done by a completely set of different people. Now causing a lot of trouble, because those people are not familiar with the project, they don't know the ins and outs, maybe they're from outside the organization. So one way, try to involve people out of your own organization, people who have been involved in the design, have been involved in the early stages of the project, to have them continue into your project team. So great question, Mauricio. Thank you for asking, and it's absolutely a good practice to have your project manager as soon as possible out of your own organization. Okay, let's go to question number 5. Question number 5 came in from Juvens. I hope I pronounced that correct. Juvens N, and it received 8 votes. We actually had 2 questions with 8 votes, so that's why we have another one coming up as question 6. Is the project charter mandatory? 2008, I worked for various projects. This is Juvens. I did not see and hear what about project charter until recently. I've learned this module 1, in which I see the importance and influence of the project charter in project implementation. So that I would like to know if the project charter is mandatory for every project and its relationship with grant agreement or contract management signed by the coordinator and donor. Great question, great question. It depends, I think, in your organization, whether or not the project charter is mandatory. If you ask me, as an expert, I consider it as mandatory. I don't think any organization should start a project without having a project charter. Project charter. Maybe you call it a project definition document, or you call it a project brief, or a project initiation document. That's fine as you have a document, page document, but a document of maybe 3 to 5 pages that really summarizes the essence of the project. What are the project objectives? What are the results to be achieved? What are the milestones? What is the duration of this project? What is the budget? Who are the key people involved? What are some elements on governance? So you do want to have a document that describes that. And in that way, I would consider the project charter mandatory. Document in IDB funded projects? No, it's not. But I think, as I explained in the first question, the second question, I think there's a lot of value in a project charter document. Let me add one more item why it's valuable. I think what you see a lot is that projects are designed and approved by, and then you have a new team coming in to implement the project. It's an excellent opportunity to write your project charter with the team. So you review all the documents that are there, all the design documents, all the basically all the input documents, and then with your team, it's a great team exercise. Start drafting and documenting your project charter in a couple of pages. And then it's, first of all, a nice team exercise with the team. You can get familiar with the project. Plus, you immediately have your first communication tool, which you can share with your stakeholders. You can maybe turn it into a nice presentation. Maybe you make a nice video on your project charter out there so that your stakeholders and the people know what the project is about. That answer your question a little bit on the mandatory project charter, whether it is mandatory. The second part was its relationship with grant agreement or contract management. As I mentioned, I think I know the IDB, I don't know other donor organizations, but as far as the IDB, it's not a mandatory document. But as I mentioned, there are some other mandatory documents like the annual operating plan, like the semi-annual program. You anyhow have your loan agreement or your grant agreement document, which form a big part of your contract management of the program. So I hope that answers that question. And let's go to question number. Oh, sorry. I think we have a support slide with this question, because there was one more element that I wanted to share, which is the triple constraint. Thank you. More element to explain, let's say, the value of the project charter, because basically, and we've seen this diagram, this is called the project restrictions diagram. Sometimes it's called the triple constraint. It's in the learning guide on page 16, and this diagram basically shows the balance between your project scope, the duration for the project, and the cost or the budget. And in essence, the project charter signifies the agreement with your sponsor and with the key stakeholders on that balance. So it basically signifies an agreement on, okay, I can do this amount of scope, this amount of deliverables in that time frame, maybe 3 years, 4 years, at that cost, at that budget. So I always like this diagram, because it really helps to understand and you keep that balance in your project. Create this diagram for any project, even if it's a small project, even if it's maybe only a couple of weeks. You still want to make sure that the scope that you're trying to do, the results that you try to achieve within that 6 weeks time frame, at the budget or cost that you have available. If it's not in balance, then you probably have to adjust one of the sides. I think what you see a lot in practice is that people want too much. People are too ambitious. In time, it's not feasible, or there's no budget. Maybe there is a fiscal space restriction. You don't get more budget allocated. You know your budget, and you match you adjust your scope with the budget that you have, and as well as the time. So the triple constraint is a real nice technique to find that balance. And in your project charter, you want to have that balance back, and you want to make sure that the three are aligned. Let's go to the sixth question from the prepared questions, and then after that we go to the live questions. You still have a chance to put in your live questions, so if you want to do that, please do it now. This is the last question that we took from the pre-voted questions. It came in from an anonymous person. It received 8 votes, and the question is about the content of the project charter. Why doesn't the project charter include project expected results and/or the desired impact? One of the key project elements to be communicated to stakeholders. Great question. And yes, absolutely, it is absolutely critical to communicate the key results, the impact, the outcomes, the outputs to your stakeholders. I want to show a diagram out of the PMA guide to explain a little bit the logic or related to the result matrix. Thank you. So in the diagram you see now, this also comes out of the PMA Learning guide on page 35. It's basically the diagram that shows the creation process for the project charter. And as you've probably seen, a lot of the processes that we're covering in this course starts with a source. There are some sources. In this case, it's the financer and the condition in which the project is going to take place. Techniques and outputs. Together. A critical input into this project charter creation process is the result matrix. The result matrix is usually prepared as part of the design or program. The result matrix typically consists of the ultimate impact that the project is supposed to achieve, the outcomes that should be achieved and how they are going to be measured, and then the outputs. The outputs are the tangible the project is going to achieve. Those outputs should result in the outcomes, and the outcomes should ultimately result in the impact. In your project charter, you have a section on objectives and scope, where you would match to your result matrix. This is typically where you would put your key outputs, your key deliverables. So that's why it's so important to have that result matrix as an input, and that's why it's important to put it in. And as you can see on this slide, this is a summary of the key elements in the project charter. So you have your rationale, your purpose, then you have your project objectives, and then in the project strategy part, you see the scope and its limits. Okay, what is not in scope? Where are my boundaries of my scope? And as part of that scope, you can refer to your outputs. You can refer to your impact and your outcomes. You also have your schedule of milestones, your budget, your risks, assumptions, your structure of governance, management and team, and change control. So with that, hopefully we have answered at least some of your questions on the project charter. I have to say, I saw a lot of activity in the course. A lot of good questions came in. It looks like we have about 7 live questions, so we are going to put those up. I just want to thank you all for putting in your questions, and I want to really invite you to also start putting in questions for the next week. We have our next session coming in already on Monday next week. As you probably all received an email yesterday with the start of the course, the second week of the course. We have 2 modules in that course. I know a lot of people are already now studying in that second week and those modules. Feel free to put in your questions. We have the next live session coming up on Monday. We'll lead that session. I will be in the background, and we are really looking forward to answer your questions there. Okay, now we get to the real interesting part, because I haven't seen your live questions. So let's see if we have a first live question that we can put on the screen. and see if I can give a good answer. This first live question came in from Danish Aman. Between project charter and project contract? That is a great question, Danish. Thank you very much for putting in that question. A contract, and I think in different countries, maybe contracts are viewed differently. So it depends a little bit in the context and the setting where you are. But to me, a contract, legal aspects. And in a way, I discussed earlier the loan agreement or the loan proposal. That usually comes also with a loan contract. And there are a lot of legal elements in there. So typically, the project contract goes hand in hand with that. Having said that, a project charter is also a document between the sponsor and the project manager, and basically allows the project manager to now start using resources and start spending funds. So in a way, it's a contract between the sponsor and the project manager. So the two can be the same. It can be that your project charter is also your project contract. However, what I've seen in many cases is that you have the project charter, which is really used as a communication vehicle to various stakeholders. A contract which deals with all the legal aspects. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. Let's see if we have another question. Second question, also from Danish. How much I have to detail cost in the project charter? Great question. Great question. In the project charter, you try to detail, in one way I want to say as much as you can, but you don't want to get too detailed. So it could be that as part of your project charter development, you already have a pretty detailed budget, which is good, because the more detailed your budget is, probably the better your cost estimate will be. However, in the charter, you summarize the budget. So at the highest level, it would be the total project budget. Or if your project is built up in different components, you would maybe split the budget by component. If you have different funding agencies, which sometimes happens, that you split the budget also by funding agency. So typically, you could include a small table with the budget. Gonna include an Excel with 500 pages or 500 rows of detailed budget. Okay, I hope that answered the cost question. Question number 3 came in from F. Campos. Thank you. The question is, what if we find sponsors' resistance to use project charts or project charter? Case. This is a nice question. In a way, it would be good if the sponsor understands the value of the project charter. So if the sponsor resists to the project charter, they would interpret that as the sponsor not really wanted to put in paper what he or she wants with the project, which is interesting. So I would then go talk with the sponsor and ask why. Why don't you want to put in a short document what we're going to do? So I guess I would like to try to understand, where does the resistance come from? There could be various reasons, and we can assume a lot of things, but assuming is always dangerous. So my advice would be, go talk to the sponsor, try to explain what the value of the project charter is, take an example, and then maybe he or she doesn't want to call it project charter, but want to call it a project definition document. Well, that's fine, if it's just a matter of defining what you call it. But that's how I would approach that resistance. Thank you for that question. Let's see if we have more questions coming in. Marilyn asks the following question. How much time would you recommend to expend on developing the project charter? Would you recommend that it's a team effort? Great question, Marilyn. Thank you. A great question and difficult to answer. Developing the project charter, you could almost see as a mini project. And it depends a little bit. If you are developing a project charter for a 6 weeks project, 4 weeks on developing the project charter. In fact, then the project charter is probably a one-pager. And you're probably going to spend a couple of hours developing the project charter. If you're going to develop a project charter for a 3 or 4 year project or program, then you need more time. And it can take a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month. It depends, but don't take too long. You don't want to take it 3 months or 2 months. So a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month. If it's a real large project, maybe 6 weeks. In those weeks, you try to collect as much information as you can. You don't know everything, so you have to estimate. You have to put in assumptions, and that's okay. So you write down what you know. Put in some assumptions, put in some risks, some constraints you already know, and then get it signed off and get started. Hope that answers your question. Let's see if we have a question. Question 5 comes from Juan Sebastian Espinoza. Muchas gracias. Thank you. How can you determine if a person has project management skills in an interview? What kind of answers does a person give you to understand is the right person? Whoa, this is a great question. I would use well, first of all, I would always have a couple of people talk to the people who you interview. You would like to know what is the person's prior experience. If the person can come up and explain and talk to some prior experiences, what went well, what went wrong. Just talks about project management and says that everything was very successful and there were no issues and all his projects finished on time, I'm worried, because that's impossible. Make sure the answers, make sure the person talks realistically. He or she understands what's involved in projects. How did you resolve some of the issues you were confronted with? Confronted with any issue. Okay, then I think it's end of the interview. If you're interviewing somebody that had never had an issue in a project, then end of the interview. But it's a very interesting question, and I'm sure different people have different aspects on this. Maybe it's nice to put it in the forum as well and see what other participants think about this question. There was a second element to this question that I just slipped my mind. I don't know if we can question real quick. What kind of answers does to know it's the right person? Yeah, I think if the person uses project management terms in the right way, so a lot of the terms that you learn in this course, if the person uses those terms in the right way and can link them to prior experiences, I think you're on a good track. The fact that a person has a certification does not necessarily mean that the person is also a good project manager. A bit weird, but a certification is something on paper. So I would always ask for references. Ask if you can talk to a sponsor of one of his former projects or former projects. So I would definitely talk to people who've worked with the person to get a full picture of the person. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Let's see if we have. I work in a consult from Diana. Thank you. I work in a consultant firm. How much should be the donor involved in developing the project charter? Especially because the approval of the project charter could delay the starting of the project. Yes, that's a good question. There should always be some kind of involvement of the donor. And then at the same time, you don't want the project charter process to run forever. So I mentioned earlier in one of the prior questions, developing the project charter is almost like a project. Approach it as a project. I would say, okay, we're going to take 4 weeks for the project charter. The end result is the project charter. So whatever happens after 4 weeks, we have the project charter. We basically time box the time that we have to develop the project charter. Make sure all your stakeholders are aware of that. Make sure the donor is aware of it. Make sure that all the people who need to approve the project charter know upfront what they need to do, get their buy-in. So in that way, I think you can find the process of developing the project charter. You can take better control. Make sure that upfront everybody who needs to approve and sign off is aware of that, and that they get sufficient time to give that approval. Really like a mini project. So it could actually, to link it to the other question, what is a good project manager? If the project manager is successfully able to finish the project charter on time, he probably has good project management skills. So then that person is probably can be considered for the continuation. Should it be developed by the team? If you already have a team, if you already have some people available, yes, it helps. It helps. Okay, I think we have one more question. Let's take that one, and then we're going to wrap up. The question comes from Sergio Chacon. Any thoughts about how to negotiate changes to project charter already approved when that change comes from your main donor? Great question. Great question. In a way, you always hope that you don't have to change your project charter, but it can happen, and it's not a document written in stone. So if it has to happen, if some of your outputs or key results for whatever reason change, then change and do it through. So basically, you want to make sure that that change is signed off by some kind of change control board, and you have to decide in your organization who that is. It could be a steering committee, it could be a project management board, it could be a change control board. So it doesn't really matter then where the change comes from. From somebody, from the donor, from doesn't matter what. If the change can be justified, if the benefits of that change out-benefit the impact and the cost, if the impact and cost and impact on schedule is well understood, and if all the key stakeholders approve, if the change board approves that change with all the impact, then that's fine. And then you can change your project charter. So just make sure that you have a good change control process in place, that you know who needs to sign off on changes. Usually it's a sponsor, but it could be a couple of people in the organization. And then you should be fine. Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap up this first expert live session. I want to thank everybody for your participation and your questions. This session is being recorded, so you can review this session, or if you missed out, you can see it. It will stay on edX and YouTube, so you can see it there. It will be Monday, March 6th. You can look at the time schedule in the course, what time that is in your time zone. We will then go over the next 2 modules, which is the work breakdown structure and the time schedule. So please put in your questions you have for that. Vote to the questions. We'll pick up as many questions that we can in the prepared part. And then next week on Monday, we also have space for some live questions. So please also promote this live session to your colleagues, anyone who would like to benefit from this live session. And I hope to see you today. Then my colleague Gentil from Haiti, he will lead the session. I will be in the background looking at your live questions. And I hope to see you all back on Monday, of course, this week. And we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.